Welcome back, everyone. We're diving deep today, and it's a pretty special one. We're going to be exploring the life and legacy of Beatrice Comfort Ashun.
A remarkable woman indeed.
Now, going through these excerpts you sent, something jumped out at me. The way they describe her impact, like a living testament.
Oh, interesting. How so?
It's not just, a memory or something.
Right.
It's presented as something active, powerful, even.
That's a fascinating way to frame it.
Yeah, it really makes you think. What makes that kind of legacy stand out? What sets it apart?
Exactly. It's more than just, being remembered.
Right. And to really get into this, we're going to be focusing on Beatrice's daughter, Elizabeth. She really seems to embody this whole living testament idea.
I see.
So we'll be looking at themes of service, community, the way faith shapes a family.
And of course, how all of that connects to some powerful scriptures.
You got it. A rich tapestry indeed.
I'm really interested to see how those scriptural connections add to our understanding.
Me too. Okay, so get this. Elizabeth is one of 9 children.
Wow.
Yeah, 9. And from a young age, she's helping raise her siblings, stepping up.
Really taking on responsibility early on.
Exactly. The text even mentions her brothers nicknamed her the social worker.
The social worker. That's striking, isn't it? It speaks volumes.
It really does. Especially when you think about how the source emphasizes how Beatrice instilled this, deep-seated passion for God and her children.
Mm-hmm.
It's like service became almost a natural part of their faith.
Woven into their daily lives, you might say.
Yeah, exactly. And it goes even further than that.
Oh.
The source actually uses this phrase. They'd say Elizabeth was anointed as an ambassador of God.
Anointed as an ambassador of God. That's powerful imagery.
Right. To me, that implies a purpose that's, it's more than just being helpful.
Right.
It suggests something, I don't know, almost like a calling.
I agree. Ambassador. It suggests representing something much bigger than yourself.
Right.
But what's really fascinating is that this doesn't necessarily mean, some grand gesture.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes the most profound acts of service are those quiet ones.
Right.
Within our families, our communities. Those seemingly ordinary moments of just, caring and support.
Elizabeth's dedication to her family really embodies that.
It does, doesn't it?
It's like she's laying the groundwork for that ambassadorship right there at home.
That's a great point.
And speaking of groundwork, the text really highlights Beatrice's influence.
Oh, absolutely.
It wasn't just about, going to church on Sundays.
Mm-hmm.
It was about weaving faith into the very essence of their family life.
It's presented as an active force.
It is.
Not just something they inherited,
right.
But something they lived, something that shaped their choices,
Totally. And it's so evident in Elizabeth's life.
It really is.
It's like faith became the lens through which they viewed, everything.
A guiding principle.
Yeah, exactly. And that brings us to this really interesting element. The source material includes a whole collection of scriptures alongside the biographical information.
Fascinating. Almost like a framework.
It is, like a way to understand the family's values even more deeply.
Each verse carefully chosen, you might say.
So let's start with Micah 6.8.
Okay.
Do justice, love mercy, walk humbly with your God.
Yeah.
I was reading this and this story about Beatrice popped into my head. Remember where it said she specific anecdote about Beatrice showing one of these qualities?
Yes.
Like she was living this verse without even realizing it.
Absolutely. And what's even more interesting is how that same spirit shows up in Elizabeth's actions. The source mentions how she, specific example of Elizabeth's actions that echo Micah 6.8.
It's not about being perfect, is it?
No, not at all. It's about embodying these principles in our everyday lives.
Yeah, completely. And then we have Matthew 25.3540, which talks about serving others, as if you were serving Christ himself.
Powerful concept.
It is. And hello, the social worker, right? It's like she was living out this verse.
It's a direct connection.
It really is. It highlights how her faith wasn't just, internal.
Right.
It manifested in her actions, helping those in need, caring for the sick, welcoming strangers.
All of those things align perfectly with that passage.
They do. Now, we can't forget the love chapter.
Yep. Right.
1 Corinthians 13.4-7.
Right.
Patience, kindness, forgiveness. We all know this one, right?
A classic.
But it's not just a pretty poem, is it?
No, it's much more than that. It's a way of life.
It is.
And I think it gives us a lens through which to view both Beatrice and Elizabeth.
Mm-hmm.
That selflessness, the lack of boasting, that persistent hope, it's all reflected in their lives and how they treated others.
Like, this passage provides the very foundation for their service.
I like that, the foundation.
Like, love isn't just a feeling.
It's the driving force.
Exactly. It fuels those actions. And that brings us to Psalm 103.13, which talks about God's compassion for his children, like a father's love. It makes me think of the kind of home Beatrice created.
That sense of warmth, of security.
Exactly. A nurturing environment. And what's interesting is that same love seems to be reflected in Elizabeth's approach to caring for others.
Mm-hmm. As if she internalized her mother's compassion.
Yeah. Like she made it her own. Makes you wonder, are we passing those same values on, to the people around us?
That's a great question to consider.
It is. Now, Colossians 3.12-14 encourages us to clothe ourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience.
Quite the wardrobe.
Right. And it almost feels like the Ashun family took this passage and turned it into a daily uniform.
A way of life, a guiding principle,
That's right.
And an emphasis on forgiveness, bearing with one another, prioritizing love.
Yeah.
It all aligns with what the source tells us about their strong bonds, that supportive environment.
It wasn't just an idea, it was something they lived.
Exactly.
It's amazing how these verses are woven into their lives,
It is. It's a beautiful thing to see.
And speaking of weaving, James 1.27 talks about caring for the vulnerable as a true expression of faith.
What a beautiful verse.
It is. And it's like Elizabeth, with her social worker title, was putting this verse into action,
Absolutely. It highlights how true faith isn't passive.
Mm-hmm.
It's about actively engaging with the world, alleviating suffering.
And Elizabeth's life really illustrates that.
It does.
Beautifully. And it's not just about caring for strangers, right?
Yeah.
It's about supporting those closest to us, too. That's where Galatians 6.2 comes in. Carry each other's burdens.
That speaks directly to the family dynamic, doesn't it?
It does. Elizabeth's willingness to help raise her siblings.
To be that pillar of support.
Yeah. That really embodies this concept.
A reminder that sometimes the most impactful service happens right at home.
So true. And, sometimes those acts of service require a lot of forgiveness and understanding.
Right. That's where Ephesians 4.32 comes in. It urges us to be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other.
It feels like the beating heart of their approach to life,
It does.
It suggests that compassion and forgiveness, they weren't just ideals for them. They were woven into their daily interactions.
Yeah.
Shaping their relationships with each other and with the world.
Inspiring, isn't it? Seeing how these scriptures come alive in their lives.
It is. It's humbling, even.
But it also makes you think, what testaments are we creating through our actions, That whole living testament idea we started with.
It's a powerful question. A challenge to all of us.
Is.
If our actions speak louder than words,
right,
then our lives become testaments to our true values.
That's a great place to pause for now. Join us for part 2, where we'll continue exploring Elizabeth's journey and unpack those thought-provoking questions about the legacies we create.
I look forward to it. Welcome back to our deep dive into the legacy of Beatrice Comfort, Ashun. As we dig deeper into her story, it's striking how much her faith was intertwined with action.
It wasn't just a set of beliefs, right?
It really wasn't. It was a way of life.
Yeah, the source material emphasizes that Beatrice saw faith as a call, to make a real impact on the world.
And that perspective clearly resonated with Elizabeth.
It did.
It's like Elizabeth took those seeds of faith and, she nurtured them into this thriving garden of service and compassion.
Beautiful imagery. I like that. And it highlights the importance of mentorship, in shaping Elizabeth's path.
Yeah.
Beatrice wasn't just a mother.
Right.
She was a guide. A living example of how faith how it could translate into action.
Speaking of examples, remember that phrase that really stood out to me? Anointed as an ambassador of God.
Oh, yes. A powerful statement.
It is. We talked about it before, but I think it deserves a closer look. What do you think it really means in the context of Elizabeth's life?
Well, if we think about an ambassador as someone who represents a higher authority, then Elizabeth's life becomes a testament to God's love and compassion and action.
Okay, I see that.
Yeah.
But it wasn't about assuming power or anything like that.
Not at all. It was about embodying those values.
I see.
In her daily life,
Yeah.
The way she interacted with others.
So it's less about the title and more about the way she lived.
Exactly. And that's where the scriptures we talked about earlier, they become so relevant. Remember Matthew 25.35-40? where Christ calls us to serve the least of these.
Yeah.
Elizabeth's life seems to be a direct reflection of that passage.
It's like she took those words and turned them into a blueprint for her actions.
A blueprint for living.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But it wasn't just about, grand gestures or heroic acts or anything like that.
Right, those are important too, of course, but the source material emphasizes the significance of those everyday choices,
Yeah.
Small acts of kindness that, they ripple outwards.
And it all started at home, right?
Yeah, exactly. Within her own family.
That's what's so remarkable to me. Her dedication to serving others. It began at home, helping to raise her 9 siblings.
Imagine that, 9 siblings.
It's a lot. But it reminds us that some of the most profound acts of service, they occur in those ordinary moments.
Right, within the walls of our own homes.
Yeah, those seemingly insignificant moments of care and support.
And those small acts, when performed consistently and with love, they can have a profound impact.
I agree. It's about cultivating a culture of compassion.
Yes. Starting with our families and then, radiating outwards.
It makes me think of that quote by Mother Teresa.
Which one?
Not all of us can do great things, but we can do small things with great love.
That's a good one. It perfectly encapsulates the philosophy that seems to have guided Elizabeth's life.
It does. It brings us back to that idea of interconnectedness.
Yeah.
Faith, family, community.
The Ashun family story really shows how these elements intertwine.
They do. They reinforce one another. It's like a beautiful tapestry.
It is each element strengthening and supporting the others.
And it reminds us that we're not isolated individuals.
Mm-hmm.
We're part of a larger web of relationships.
A web of interconnectedness.
Exactly. And those relationships, they have the power to shape us, to inspire us, to challenge us.
To make us better.
To live more compassionately.
Yeah.
Just look at the relationship between Beatrice and Elizabeth.
Such a powerful example.
Beatrice's example, her unwavering faith and commitment to service it, clearly left a mark on Elizabeth.
An indelible mark, you might say.
It makes you wonder, who are the people in our lives who have instilled that in us? That passion for something bigger than ourselves?
That's a great question.
Whose examples have challenged us to live, more authentically, more compassionately?
To live in alignment with our values.
Exactly. That's a powerful question. And it challenges us to consider how we can be those sources of inspiration for others.
To pass on that torch, so to speak.
Yeah, to pass on the torch of compassion and service.
It makes you think about legacy, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. We keep coming back to that idea of a living testament.
Mm-hmm.
What does it really mean to leave a legacy? One that extends beyond our own lifetimes.
It's not about possessions or, accomplishments, really. It's about the impact we have on others.
The values we embody.
The ripple effects of our choices.
Exactly. If we think about Beatrice's legacy through the lens of those scriptures, it's clear that her impact wasn't limited to just her family.
Right.
Those verses like Micah 6.8 and James 1.27.
Powerful verses.
They call for a broader sense of justice, mercy, care for the vulnerable.
It suggests that her legacy extended outwards.
It did, encompassing this commitment to creating a more just and compassionate world.
And Elizabeth's life becomes a testament to that legacy.
It does.
A living embodiment of those values in action.
It's a powerful reminder that our actions have consequences.
They do.
Consequences that extend far beyond ourselves.
Shaping the world around us in ways we may never fully comprehend.
It's like that proverb, a society grows great when old men plant trees whose shade they know they shall never sit in.
I love that proverb. It speaks to the selfless nature of true service.
It does. Recognizing that our actions today, they can create a better future for those who come after us.
For generations to come.
That brings us to a crucial question. What seeds are we planting? What kind of world do we want to create for our children, for our grandchildren?
What values do we want to pass on?
Yeah, what actions will contribute to a more just, compassionate, and loving world?
These are the questions at the heart of Beatrice Comfort Ashun's legacy.
They are. It's not just about remembering her life.
Right.
It's about carrying forward that torch.
The torch of faith, service, and love.
Exactly. As we move into the final part of our deep dive, I want to challenge you.
Okay.
Think about those questions in your own life. What kind of living testament are you creating? What seeds of compassion and hope are you planting?
How can you ensure that your legacy will continue to inspire and uplift others, even after you're gone?
Those are questions worth pondering.
They are. And as we delve into the remaining scriptures, I believe we'll find even more insights
into the nature of legacy.
Yes, and the enduring power of faith, love, and service.
Welcome back to our deep dive, everyone. It's amazing how each scripture we've looked at has, well, it's added another layer to how we see Beatrice's impact.
Like pieces of a puzzle.
Yeah, exactly. Like threads in a tapestry.
Those scriptural connections have been illuminating.
They have. So, speaking of connections, let's get back to those scriptures we haven't talked about yet.
Okay.
We left off talking about legacy.
Mm-hmm.
So, Psalm 103.13 feels like the right place to start.
It does.
It compares God's compassion for his children to a father's love.
A beautiful comparison.
It is. And I can't help but think of, well, the kind of home Beatrice created.
That nurturing environment.
Exactly.
It gives us a glimpse into her parenting, you know?
Yeah, a heart full of tenderness and care. And what's interesting is that same warmth.
Right.
That same generosity of spirit.
Mm-hmm.
It seems to be reflected in Elizabeth's life, too.
It's like she absorbed that love and then, well, learned to express it outwards.
Towards her siblings, the people she served.
It reminds me of something you said earlier about love being,
Taught and learned.
Yes. And I think that's one of the most important takeaways from the Ashun family story.
It really is.
How powerful those early influences can be. Beatrice's example.
Her unwavering faith, her compassion.
Had a profound impact on Elizabeth.
It really did. It makes you think about the legacies we pass down, even in those small, everyday interactions.
Absolutely.
Speaking of legacies, Colossians 3.1-14 always stands out to me. Clothe yourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience.
Quite the wardrobe.
Right. It feels like, a blueprint for living a life grounded in faith.
It does, doesn't it? And when I think about the Ashun family, those qualities really do seem to be woven into their lives.
The way they supported each other, forgave each other, prioritized love.
It all aligns so beautifully with this passage.
It's like they took those words and, made them their own. Turned them into action.
A living embodiment.
Exactly. And that reminds me of James 1.27.
Okay.
It emphasizes caring for the vulnerable.
A powerful call to action.
It is. It's like this verse was made for Elizabeth and her unofficial title of the social worker.
That connection is undeniable. It highlights how faith for Elizabeth wasn't about, staying within the walls of a church. Mm-hmm. It was about going out into the world and meeting people where they were.
Especially those who are hurting.
Exactly. A good reminder for all of us.
It is. True faith, it's not passive.
Right.
It's about actively engaging with the world and, trying to make it a better place.
But sometimes that engagement starts at home, right?
You're right. Within our families.
Remember Galatians 6.2. Carry each other's burdens.
That verse says so much about the support system in the Ashun family.
Elizabeth's willingness to help raise her siblings, to be that source of strength.
It's a beautiful example of this principle.
Putting faith into practice.
Yeah, within her own home, long before she, ventured out into the wider world.
And that brings us to our final scripture for today.
Okay.
Ephesians 4.32. Be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other, just as in Christ God forgave you. Powerful stuff.
It is. And what strikes me is how this verse seems to sum up the Ashun family's, their overall approach to life.
It wasn't just about talking about kindness and forgiveness. It was about living it out.
Every single day.
And I think that's one of the most inspiring takeaways from their story,
It really is.
The power of creating an environment of grace and understanding.
Where people feel safe, supported.
Exactly.
Well, we've explored Beatrice Comfort Ashun's life, seen how her faith and compassion took root in her daughter Elizabeth, and connected it all to these inspiring scriptures.
It's been quite a journey.
It has. And Beatrice's story is a powerful reminder. Even seemingly ordinary lives can have an extraordinary impact.
It all comes down to the choices we make.
The values we embody.
The love we share.
If actions are indeed a living testament, like those excerpts suggested, it's worth asking ourselves, what kind of testaments are we creating?
What seeds of compassion and hope are we planting?
What kind of world are we leaving behind for the generations to come?
Those are important questions for all of us to consider.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the life and legacy of Beatrice Comfort Ashun.
May her story inspire us all.
And until next time, remember that even the smallest acts of kindness can have a ripple effect.
An effect that extends far beyond our own lifetimes.